Hello guys, welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to set up a router as a DNS server in this particular lab. Again, although this is a capability of the router, I would really not use it unless I have to. It does put a lot of strain on the router when you configure it as a DNS server. In this particular video, we're going to be taking a look at what a DNS server is, okay? What does it do? How do you set up a router as a DNS server? Some configuration commands regarding it, and then we'll do a lab. Again, this lab will build up on that same lab that we've been doing. So right now we're up until the web server lab. So in this particular video, we would have already configured this as a web server. We've configured this as a web server or a secure web server. We have this as the DHCP server. These things have already been done. These two over here are acting as DHCP relays. Now in this particular lab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up router 1 as my local DNS server. Not only that, for all the different hosts that it's not aware of, it's going to point to the internet DNS server on the ISP. So this is going to be my forward DNS, or for a forward lookup, this is my DNS server on the internet. So we're going to do that as well. All right. So with that in mind, let's get started. First of all, what does DNS do for us? We had a detailed discussion about the DNS in one of the initial videos. DNS basically allows people to refer to servers using their names rather than using what? The IP addresses. IP addresses are not something that we are really accustomed to using in real life. So rather than using IP addresses, we use the names of the servers. The name of the server is broken down into two parts, which is the host name. That's the name of the device, followed by the domain name, which is the company's name generally. The company will be assigned a name like abc.com. That's the domain name. And my device over here might be router 1. So router 1 would become router1.abc.com. This full name, host name dot domain name, is known or referred to as the fully qualified domain name. This is the one that we use to communicate to devices. All right. And rather than using IP addresses, we use the DNS server to resolve the name. I have a typo over here. In many cases, we're okay. This is the name server. I'll explain that to you guys as well. This allows us to successfully find and connect to internet websites and services no matter where they are, using names rather than IP addresses. If I told you to go to google.com, you remember google.com. You don't remember something like 199.1.5.7. That would be hard to remember, but google.com is something that we refer to with names and even in real life, and that's what DNS allows us the ability to do, to resolve. Now, you have two types of DNS servers that we can have. I can have a local DNS server, which is locally connected, and normally speaking, this is not on a router. This would be a set Microsoft or a Linux server that is running the DNS server software on it. But over here, in case that you don't have a server to spare, you can use a router on a small network to act as the DNS server, but it's not going to hold all the host names of the internet. So what you do is you point to the DNS server on the internet, the ISP's DNS server. This is known as the forward name server. So if I don't have it, I'm going to point to this particular IP address as my forward lookup server. So this is my DNS server. Okay, so we went through this already. In many cases where a local DNS server is not available, we could either use our ISP's DNS server or some public DNS server. If you don't have access to your ISP's DNS server, there's some DNS servers that are out there that are publicly available for everyone to use. This is one of them. This is Google's DNS server. You can always use that to connect up using this DNS server, 8.8.8.8, simple one to remember. All right. How do I configure a router as a DNS server? As I said, our Cisco router does have the capability of acting as a DNS server, I would try to stay away from it because it does put a lot of load on the device, on the router. It's not doing routing now, it's acting as a DNS server. So this could be useful for resolving local host names. And for the host names that you cannot resolve locally, you're going to point to the ISP DNS server or the public DNS server like that, like the one that I showed you, 8.8.8.8, that's Google's DNS server. All right. How do I turn on the DNS server on a router? Very simple. You just turn the service on by typing in a command called IP DNS server. What this does is turns the service on, but now by just turning the service on, I haven't done the entire job because I still need to tell my device what are the different mappings that I have, what host name will point to what IP address, and that's the next thing that I need to do on my router. And this is where you put in the IP host command. For every domain name that you need to get resolved on the local device, you would need to have a host name command for that, and I'll demonstrate that to you guys in the next slide. So in order to do this over here, so to create these host names, let me go ahead and show you how to do that on the next slide over here. These are the commands, these are the sequence of things that you would do to set up your router as a DNS server. The first thing that you would do is you would turn on the DNS server capability, enables the router as a DNS server, IP DNS server. But again, one of the things that we do is we generally go on a router, and what we do is we disable this capability called the domain lookup, because sometimes what happens is if we mistype a command on your router, it thinks it's a domain name and it tries to look for a domain name by broadcasting it. So IP domain lookup basically stops that service. But in this case, because I do want it to do a domain lookup, I need that command on. So make sure you have the IP domain lookup command turned on, otherwise it's not going to do the domain lookup. The other thing that you also need to do over here is, just in case you don't have the name, you need to point to a DNS server. This is your DNS server. So I am the DNS server, but if I don't have a host name, I'm going to point to 20.2 as the DNS server for my device. So I am router 1, I'm a DNS server. These are my host names over here that I've created. So if somebody wants to go to r1.abc.com, they're going to use 192.168.10.1. If they want to go to r4.abc.com, they're going to go to 192.168.10.4. R5 is 192.168.10.5. But what if I want to go to someone that is not in this list? If your DNS server cannot find the name, it's going to forward that request to its name server, which is, in my case, 192.1.20.2. So what I'm going to do over here, based on our lab topology, I'm going to set this guy up as my DNS server for my local network, and maybe configure the 3 routers, router 1, router 4, and router 5 with the appropriate host names, the fully qualified domain names, and the corresponding IP addresses. For everything else, I'm going to point to the ISP DNS server, which is 192.1.20.2, this IP over here. All right, so that's what this is doing over here. Let me just bring it back up, recap that. So the first thing is turn the services on, IP DNS server and IP domain lookup to do the name lookup. Then I point to my DNS server in case I don't have a name. This is my DNS server, and to create the host entries on my local device, this is how I do it. Good. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the lab. Lab configure R1 as a DNS server, configure a host name to IP mapping for these 3 devices, R1, R4, and R5. Use abc.com as the domain name. Configure R2 as the name server for R1. So R1 will point to R2 as the name server, and based on this, we'll do the connectivity test. All right. One thing additional I'll also set up router 2 as my name server. I haven't done that, and I'll create an entry for R3 whatever you want to call it, r3.bbc.com. So R3 will be bbc.com, which is this guy over here. So I can also test some remote entries over here. So this will be r3.bbc.com. all right, which is going to be 30.3. Let's go ahead and do that now. I'll go to router 1, IP DNS server, turn it on, IP domain dash lookup, so it will do the name lookup. That part is done. My name server is 192.20.2. I should be able to ping it. Yeah, that's working fine. Now my host name entries, IP host r1.abc.com. So if somebody wants to go to r1.abc.com, that's the IP address 10.1. Someone wants to go to locally, or the local setup, abc.com, it is going to be 10.4. If somebody wants to go to r5.abc.com, it is going to be 10.5. So these names have been created over here. So if I do test by doing a ping over here to r1.abc.com, it should ping. See, I used the name and it resolved it to 10.1. Similarly, if I ping r4, it should resolve to 10.4, and if I ping r5, it should resolve to 10.5. So my device now is acting as a DNS server. Now let's do R2 as a DNS server as well. Again, the same things. IP DNS server, IP domain dash lookup, turn that capability on. IP host, because I don't have R3, we said bbc.com, because I don't have another DNS server in my particular lab. I don't need to do the name server command. That's if I want to point to another name server. So over here I should be able to ping r3.bbc.com. Make sure that is working properly. That's done. If I go to router 1, which is this guy over here, now rather than pinging 30.3, I want to be able to ping r3.bbc.com. I don't have the entry, but my name server is R2, so I should be pointing to R2, and he would tell me, hey, listen, ping 192.1.30.3, which is the IP address of R3. So let's see if that works. So I'll show you both ways to do it. So if I do a ping, make sure I can ping the IP address first. That's okay. I should also be able to ping this guy. So that tells you that my name server is also working. It's translating r3.bbc.com. It went to the domain server 192.1.20.2, which is its name server. It was okay. It was able to ping. Now the last test that I need to do is I want to go to the PC, which is this PC over here that was configured for R1 as the DNS server by DHCP. We'll verify that and see if it works. So let's go to PC1. First thing is the verification. I'll do ipconfig/all. Earlier on, when we were doing the DHCP lab, we had configured the DHCP server as, DNS server as .10.1. So now this guy knows 10.1 is the DNS server. So let's go ahead and see if I can ping it. Ping r1.abc.com. I think that's the name. Strange. It does take some time for it to kick in sometimes. Oops. On the PC, for some reason, it does that. Let's try to go to the router and see if the router is working. Yep. Oh, let me see what is wrong over here. I can do ipconfig flush DNS. Maybe it has an older DNS thingy. There you go. It probably had an older entry. I flushed DNS and now it's working. It's going to 10.1. So when I pinged r1.abc.com, it went to 192.10.1. Similarly, if I go to r4.bbc.com, r5.abc.com, it goes to 10.4. And if I go to r5.abc.com, it goes to R5. It will not now at this point be able to go to R3 yet. The reason for that is R3 is on the internet. My PC's IP address right now is a private address which is not routed on the internet. So if I try to go out, my source address will be 192.168.10.0. It will hit the device, but he will not know how to get back to it. We will be able to do this after our NAT lab, and we'll definitely do that once we do the NAT. But at the same time, I could test that name server capability on R1. When I went to R1, I was able to ping r3.bbc.com from this guy, because this one is a public address which is routable on the internet. So let's just test that one more time, and we will be done with the lab. So R1, I was able to ping r3.bbc.com, working properly, no problems over there. Good, everybody? So this browse PC1, okay, they wanted, the test was browsing, I did ping, but we can do a browse as well, just quickly. We'll go back to the same browser, but right now I'm not going to use HTTP, the IP address. I'm going to say r1.abc.com. It should resolve. Again, it's asking for that password, which is fine. I'm in on R1. Similarly, I can say HTTPS r4.abc.com. That should also connect me in. No, not R2, sorry. R4. There you go, advanced. That certificate error, add exception. And I am into R4 as well. So that browsing is also successful. Now I'm browsing using my domain name, and my DNS server happens to be R1. Good. Hope you guys enjoyed this lab. Again, it's building up for the entire services lab. The next set of videos is going to take a look at NAT. And once we're done with NAT, we'll complete the entire topology over here. So my objective in this services lab was to show you how to set up this guy as your DHCP server. We've done that. Set this guy up as a DNS server. Done that. Set these two guys up for DHCP relay. We wanted to set this guy up also, these two guys, for HSRP. We wanted to set up these two guys for VRRP. All that is taken care of. The only part that is not done yet is this part, the internet part, that we're going to do using NAT. Coming up in the next set of videos. Don't miss it. Real interesting stuff. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys in the next video.